Welcome back to Only Talk Sports, and tonight we have an interview with Brandon Olson of Locked On Gators. Really appreciate him for coming on. He knows so much about Florida sports, baseball, basketball, and football. We're going to be talking about football the most, but we will touch on some of the other sports as well. But again, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh yeah, anytime, dude. I'm here for it. Let's do it.
It's going to be great. So you got Florida football. Last year, 6-6, it wasn't that great. You had a talented quarterback, but he was flawed. Anthony Richardson, he has so much talent, and he definitely could be a great player in the pros if he can get it all together. But last year, you just saw the ups and the downs. They lost the bowl game very badly to Oregon State because of the fact that most players opted out. It's understandable. They didn't have a shot. But, coming into this season for Florida football, yes, it's only Billy Napier's second season, so he should not be on any hot seat. But what is the tune, I guess you would say, with the Florida fan base? How are they feeling about Billy Napier right now?
I think right now they're just enjoying their recruiting success. Like it's like 2024 class, you've got top 3 pretty much unanimously by any recruiting service. Top 3 class. I feel like a lot of us have forgotten, we're about to have to play some games, and those probably aren't going to go very well. But for now, we're winning the summer championship. Like Miami likes to claim they are every year. They're like, summer national champions. That's what Florida's doing right now. Things will crash and burn within the next few months, at least morale-wise. But I think people are finally seeing, this is why Billy Napier was hired. He's an evaluator, a recruiter. He's a CEO type of guy. And he does call the plays for the offense, no matter how much some Florida Gators fans might hate that. He does. And, it was efficient last year. That's kind of all you can really ask for from him. But I think a lot of us he's doing his job. He's recruiting. He's building this program. He's building this program the right way with people who want to be Florida Gators. And I think that's all you can really ask for. He's got a great staff that he's building that, I know he lost quite a few coaches this year to the NFL. Kerry Colbert's with the Broncos, Patrick Toney and William Piegler with the Cardinals. That's going to happen every year, I think, in Gainesville, just because Billy Napier's hiring, first off, a ton of people. He's got one of the largest coaching staffs and largest support staffs in the country, but he's also hiring good and young coaches. And the NFL is always going to look for the next Sean McVay, the next Kyle Shanahan. Like they're always looking for the next big thing. That's why Patrick Toney's with the Arizona Cardinals right now, because he's got the potential to be the next big thing. And that's one of the reasons that I think you'll constantly see coaches come in and out of Florida. But as long as Billy Napier can kind of keep the ship going straight, I think that he's going to be perfectly fine here.
Yeah, I agree with you on talking about how, the coaches are going in and out like that because, even Alabama has, turnover with the coordinators all the time. And it's not about the continuity. It's about the right hires every single time. As long as you get that done, then you're good to go. I agree 100%. Now, obviously, Anthony Richardson, again, as talented as he was, like we said, very flawed. But this year, if he's going to be the starting quarterback, Graham Mertz is the polar opposite of Anthony Richardson. Safe, just I would say, reliable, but he was kind of turnover prone at times at Wisconsin's, at the infamous game against Notre Dame where he had 5 interceptions. That was awful. But he was a 4-star recruit out of high school, and he has talent. Just did not ever show itself at Wisconsin. First question, the second question doesn't matter if this first question is an answer as a yes. Do you think that Graham Mertz is going to be the starting quarterback for Florida? Or someone else has the job? Okay.
It's Graham. I know that they haven't officially announced it, and I'm not pretending that I've got someone in my ear going, hey, it's Graham. I just think the writing is on, Graham Mertz did not come to the University of Florida to be a backup quarterback. Simple as that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. When you look at, a lot of players in the portal, they're going to get starting jobs. I was very shocked that he went to Florida. I was not expecting that. I didn't think that he would leave the Power 5. Didn't think that, but I was really shocked that he went to Florida. But do you think that he'll have a good season? Because I guess you would say the argument for Graham Mertz that I've heard is because, Wisconsin has talent, but Florida's different type talent. But you're also playing against more teams that have more talent as well than the Big Ten outside of, maybe Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. In the SEC, you have a lot of talented teams. Do you think that Graham Mertz can have a much better season at Florida with talent around him, Billy Napier's offensive system and everything like that? Can he do well at Florida?
I think he's going to have a better year than we've seen him have. Not even because of the talent, for the reason you mentioned. They kind of cancel out to me, where it's like, yeah, you're getting better players, but you're also going against better players for the most part. But I think the biggest selling point, I'll say, is coming into Billy Napier's offense, which I know that Florida Gators fans are not huge fans of that system. But here's the thing. One, you're wrong. Two, Graham Mertz played in Wisconsin's offense last year. That was like 1905, before the forward pass was legal. Like, it was just so awful. It was like, hey, we're coming out in the I form, we're running it. And I have these numbers like seared into the back of my head, where Graham Mertz, like they handed the ball off 60% of the time last year. They ran play action on 40% of their passes, and that was 18% of their total plays. You can't run the ball 60% of the time and then only go play action on 18% of your total plays. You need to go play action a ton, especially if you're coming out in that I form. So I think that he was not done any favors by Wisconsin's offensive system. I think just having that is going to be significantly better for him. That's kind of my main selling point for why I think he's going to be better than he was at Wisconsin. Like, and I'm no Florida Gators fan is like we talk about Heismerts on Twitter, but like we're kidding. But no one is genuinely thinking he's going to win the Heisman out here. And that's not what he needs to do either. Like Billy Napier, he just wants you to take care of the football, convert some first downs when you can, and just keep killing the clock there. So what you lose from Anthony Richardson, Graham Mertz is not picking up 80-yard rushing touchdowns against LSU. He's not picking up 60-yard rushing touchdowns against Texas A&M like Anthony Richardson did. He's not throwing the ball 75 yards in the air. But he's also probably going to hit the slants and the curls that Anthony Richardson would often miss, or just throw 1,000 miles per hour at a receiver. So I feel like what you lose with explosive plays, you kind of gain with consistency and just doing the basics right. And so I feel like overall production's probably going to cancel out, at least on like a per play basis, because I do think total numbers are going to look worse because they're going to kill the clock more this year. But I feel like you're not really missing a ton. Like, you're losing the explosiveness, but yeah, we're probably going to complete more slants this year.
Yeah, I think that's accurate for sure. I mean, looking at the two quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson, it's wild to me that someone, as talented as he is, that some of the small things are hard. That's always been interesting, to think about, because, that he does the hard things well, and he does the easy stuff, and he doesn't do them very well. And that's crazy. And with Graham Mertz, it's the opposite. He's not really capable of doing anything that's going to knock your socks off, but he's a guy that, if given a chance, like you said, he should be able to do better. And I agree with that, because Iowa and Wisconsin, to me, are the two teams that will not break away from the old style of play. And when I was younger, there was a lot of teams that played that way, and it was cool, but it's not the way football is played anymore. Wisconsin might change with Luke Fickell, who knows, with Iowa. But I think that, like you said, Graham Mertz should do better with better players, with a better offensive system, and like you said, the canceling out, it should be good enough anyway. Now, with the offense and the defense, I know it's kind of a probably bad question because of the fact that it's pretty obvious, I think, which side of the ball is going to be better. But do you think the offense or the defense is going to be like the better side of the ball? Like, which one's going to be better on, more impact next season? Looking at like the defense, if the defense is going to be better than the offense, do you think that side of the ball is the more important side of the ball next year?
I will tell you this part. I will preface this by saying this. I play defense. I'm always going to say defense is more important. In every sport, I will say that until the day I die. I do think the Florida Gators defense is going to be significantly better than their offense. I think a big part of that is hiring Austin Armstrong from Southern Miss. Technically from hiring him from Alabama, but he was there for a week. But last year with Southern Miss, Austin Armstrong had the 8th highest blitz rate in all of college football. He blitzed 40% of the time. He's going to do that with same argument for Graham Mertz having more talent around him. Austin Armstrong has more talent to utilize with that crazy aggressive defense, but it's also safe on the back end. He's not Wink Martindale, and he's not just sending 7 every play. No, he's sending 5, but you don't know which 5, and he's probably playing cover 3 on the back end, so you're not just having these massive plays constantly getting behind your secondary. So I think that this is going to be a very aggressive defense that their goals are get in the backfield and cause havoc, don't give up big plays, because they feel like over time it's going to be really hard to consistently pick up first downs against this Florida Gators defense. And I think that the defense is going to be, first off, way improved from last year, which is one of the worst Florida Gators defenses I've ever seen. And I don't fault Patrick Toney for that. But I think it's going to be way improved and genuinely just a good defense in 2023.
Yeah, that's funny right there. You definitely saying that the defense is the more important side of the ball. I would agree with that because, USC, which they're a really talented team, and even Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley as well, you see the fact that they can't get over the top, over the hump of being able to win a title with a poor defense. The offense is elite, defense isn't there, and they just can't get it done. So I agree with you. If Florida can get that defense rolling and then the offense is better than average, they'll be in great shape. So I would agree with you. That's why I felt like it was too easy of a question. The defense by far looks better for sure. But now I think an interesting thing to talk about, because Dan Mullen got fired, despite having a really good record, in my opinion, of 34-15. That's not elite, but, with the talent Florida have, it's not bad either. And you mentioned, and a lot of Florida fans have mentioned that Dan Mullen got fired because he didn't care about recruiting. I was looking at the recruiting rankings for Florida during the Dan Mullen era, and it's not bad. 2018, 14th in the country. 2019, 9th in the country. 2020, 7th in the country. 2021, 12th in the country. Then last year, they were 17th. Coaching change, a little bit down on that. And then they're 12th in 2023. And like you've mentioned as well, Florida now is the 3rd best recruiting class right now for 2024. That's looking great with Billy Napier, what he's doing. But why did Dan Mullen, despite having good recruiting classes, what was it about him that just, I guess you would say, couldn't have better recruiting classes than the fact that he didn't, I guess you say, prioritize it? Because the numbers are there, but the results weren't, I guess, all over the place. And there weren't, I guess, enough talent. He wasn't trying hard enough, as you would say. But just basically break that down if you can.
When you look at the recruiting class rankings, they're not bad, right? But then you take a look at who's in those classes. 2019, 9th in the country on 24/7. Okay? Who's in that class? Chris Steele is your top-ranked player. He was there for not even a year, and then he transferred out to USC. Kyrie Elam, great. Chris Bogle transferred out to Michigan State. Tyron Hopper transferred out to Missouri. Keon Zipperer never panned out. Mahmoud Diabate transferred to Utah, went undrafted. Naquan Wright is at South Florida right now. Lloyd Summerall is at South Florida right now. Jalen Humphreys is at LSU, I believe. Michael Tarquin's at USC. Jaden Hill, not playing corner on the boundary anymore. He's playing in the nickel. Jalen Jones wasn't even there for a year. William Harrod just got he just left the team. Don't even know if he's in the portal. He just does not have a spot on this team. Gave that scholarship to a walk-on wide receiver. Chester Kimbrough, nope. Deontay Marks, nope. Riley Simons, backup. Jamarcus Weston, wide receiver, now playing safety. Kingsley Agwakin, starting center. He was your 4th lowest ranked commit in that class. Josiah Pierre, nope. Trent Whitmore, wide receiver that hit the transfer portal. Ethan White hit the transfer portal, went to USC, and then he's not playing football right now. DeJuan Black signed his letter of intent in 2019. That's awesome. He was academically ineligible. He showed up to Florida in 2021, played, did not like his role, left. Like that's why it's like the recruiting class ranking wise is awesome. Who from that was genuinely talented? There's obviously, you have Kyrie Elam in the NFL, fantastic player. Tyron Hopper, great job at Missouri. But then behind that, you have to go all the way down to Michael Tarquin, who very inconsistent last year at USC now. You go to Jaden Hill, very inconsistent. And then you have to go to the worst player in the class, ranking-wise, Ethan White, all SEC, not playing football. That's what Florida Gators fans mean when they say that Dan Mullen did not care about recruiting. He cared about having a solid ranking so that he could have that defense of What do you mean I don't care about recruiting? I got the number 9 class in the country. How could you be mad at me for that? No, he did not do his due diligence. He was just bringing in players that would fluff his class up. And you also look at how bad that class was, even ranking wise. There's a ton of players that are in the 700s and below nationally. And then he just has, 4 or 5 that are in the top 100. But even then, most of those guys did not play for the Florida Gators for any significance. So, yeah, you can look at the rankings. Good job, Dan. You're a fantastic recruiter. Love you. You're basically Urban. But then you look at whether they actually showed up in Gainesville, whether they actually contributed to the Florida Gators, whether they made it to the NFL, because you could do that with a lot of the guys from 2018 and 2019. And the answer for most of those are no. So the recruiting ranking was fine, but he just did not bring in players that would contribute. That was one of the reasons Billy Napier had such a hard time kind of getting off the ground recruiting, was because he was making sure before allowing these kids to commit and actually have a committable offer where you go, okay, you're going to be in our recruiting class. He was making sure that they were going to be academically eligible, that they can get onto campus. That's one of the reasons Florida also got a slow start with the transfer portal, because they took that same approach of going, we want to make sure that you can actually play here, so we're not wasting our time with you. And that's one of the reasons he got off to a bit slower start. But look, I've talked with people who I have a friend who used to be on the same coaching staff as or used to be on the support staff under Billy Napier at Louisiana. And he was like, look, like this guy is just so meticulous with scouting. Like I've worked with a lot of other coaches before. Most of them write 2 or 3 sentence scouting reports. Billy Napier writes like entire NFL length scouting reports on high school children playing football. So it's like, that's why with Billy Napier, I don't even care about the ranking. Like the ranking's awesome to come out here and say, yep, number 3 class in the country. Awesome. Love bragging about that. But I also don't care because I know how meticulous he is. And I know how detailed he is about things, where I know he's not bringing in players who aren't going to help. You look at this past Friday, Florida brought in Teddy Foster, a 3-star corner that until Florida offered him had no interest from schools nearby. Florida offered him. Corey Raymond is the guy that helped turn LSU into the DBU that it is now. You think he's bringing in bad cornerbacks? He's not. I think he knows more than 24/7 on 3 Rivals, ESPN, whoever you want to look at the recruiting rankings. I think Corey Raymond knows more than them. And so that's why I'm like, I don't care too much about the rankings. I trust these coaches, but that's also why, like the rankings that Dan Mullen had are the exact reasons I say I don't care about your rankings, because when you actually dive into them, complete garbage.
That's actually a really interesting thing that you brought up, because I mean, I've always thought, looking at recruiting rankings myself, that sometimes they weren't accurate. But I never really, like, you went like the whole entire class and basically all of them just did not pan out. And that's really interesting, because at the end of the day, to your point, what matters more is what they actually produce on the field. It doesn't matter about the ranking. And I mean, look at Texas A&M in 2022. They had the number 1 class over Alabama. And a lot of those guys have already left. They've already transferred out. And that's what matters. Whether they leave or whether they don't even produce at your own school, they don't leave, but then they just don't ever actually pan out, or whatever, or they have, stuff going on that they get in trouble or something like that. That's another thing. A lot of these schools bring in players that do have talent, but then they get in trouble, and that hurts as well. You want to bring in players that are not going to have those issues. They're going to be, solid people on and off the field. And that's what matters. And I think that's really interesting, because, Dan Mullen, like when I was younger, and yes, I was like 14, 15 years old when I'm seeing these numbers, I'm like, man, Dan Mullen's great. Florida's doing a great job. And it's like, and then they just don't do as well. So that is a really interesting thing that you brought. I think that a lot of schools need to pay more attention to that and do, the Billy Napier approach and some of these other coaches around college football that do a great job of knowing how to evaluate talent and bring the right players in.
Yeah, I mean, you could even look at just a further testament of Billy Napier's job as recruiting and evaluating. His first class was 2022. The lowest ranked player in it was Ty Chekhel Bowman. And he got immediate actual snaps in his true freshman year at receiver. He immediately came in and started playing. Trace Mack was competing for the starting kicker job. Like, you look at all the names. Miguel Mitchell was a 3-star and not even ranked nationally. Started a couple games at the slot last year or nickel, and is probably going to be a starting safety this year. Like, that's why I'm like, yeah, I care way more about what you actually do than anything about what your ranking is or what anybody says. Because Dan Mullen made me realize that recruiting rankings are fraudulent. And I was like, all right, that's the point where I don't even have to care about it anymore. I'm just like, is it a good player? Does Billy Napier want him? Cool. Then I could not care less about anything else at that point.
Yeah, because there's a lot of schools that, even schools that don't really recruit at a high level, like in Indiana, for example, or even, a Vanderbilt. I've seen, like, on a lot of those kind of teams, some of the players that perform the best on those teams are like the 2 stars and the low 3 stars. And then the highest ranked players that they get, maybe they'll squeak in a 4-star every now and then or some high 3 stars. A lot of those guys don't even pan out. And it's just ironic because you're like, that guy's going to do really well. And then it's this guy that was at the bottom of the recruiting ranking, 2-star player, and he finds a way to, maybe he's undrafted, but he sneaks his way in the NFL and actually has a career for himself. It's wild how that happens. But yeah, that Dan Mullen, I think Dan Mullen can coach for sure. I think that he's got a lot of upside there. But yeah, the type players he was bringing in was not helping out the Florida Gators. It's just very interesting, that when you break it down like that, to really see it, because I don't think a lot of people pay attention to that for sure. Now, obviously, you've got Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC. And whether some people, the people that are fans of Georgia, Alabama, it's like, oh, it's Oklahoma, Texas. They're already worse than us. No big deal. We're going to beat them anyway. And it's increased competition. Let's bring it. We'll still win. But then you talk about programs like Florida that has, a great history, won titles, they've got a lot of stuff going for. Now they got Billy Napier, the recruiting better and even in the rankings, but they're getting the right players as well. Do you think that Florida is now, with Billy Napier, well positioned with these, Texas, Oklahoma coming in and these new changes to the conference, not having the divisions where you could say Florida, they're in the easier division that helps them have more success because the East is easier than the West. Now that's gone, so it's going to be more even schedules. Do you think Florida is well positioned right now, despite not looking like it on the field with the record at 6-7 last year, but in the future to compete in this new age of the SEC?
I think so. Just because I feel pretty confident in Billy Napier's recruiting ability, and I think that's really where we're going to find out, who's who in the new SEC is actually bringing in top talent and then being able to develop them. And Billy Napier has also done a fantastic job of just straight up going into Texas and taking players. DJ Lagway, 2024, QB1 for Florida. Texas, Willis, Texas. Xavier Filsaime, second highest ranked player in the class for the Florida Gators, I believe, right now in 2024, from Texas. He's going into Texas and taking players already. He's going into Georgia and taking players, and not just oh, Georgia didn't want this kid. He's going into Georgia and taking players that Kirby Smart does want from his own home state. So I think that Billy Napier's recruiting is going to be enough to at least keep him in the battle. Obviously, it becomes much more of how do you actually develop these guys long term, because we know that at certain positions, at least, they've got fantastic developers. You look at Corey Raymond at your secondary coach. Like I said, LSU right now is DBU, and Corey Raymond is a huge part of it. You look at receiver coach Billy Gonzalez, not a great recruiter throughout his career, but under Urban, under Dan Mullen, he's gotten receivers to the NFL pretty consistently. He's done that very often. And then you look at the offensive line, which Rob Sale, Darnell Stapleton, fantastic offensive line duo that you have there. One's offensive coordinator and an O-line coach, one's assistant O-line coach. But, Rob Sale, I think he's one of the best offensive line developers in the entire country. I think he's incredibly underrated. You look at what he did with Andrew Thomas. He was with Andrew Thomas from 1 year after his rookie year with the New York Giants. And then Andrew Thomas was immediately one of the best offensive tackles, one of the best young offensive tackles in the NFL. You look at what Rob Sale has done with guys from Louisiana, taking 3-star players, getting them to the NFL. Max Mitchell with the New York Jets, Robert Hunt with the Miami Dolphins, DeMar Dotson with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I believe. You look at Osiris Torrance, who was Louisiana, 3-star kid. No one cared about him. He was all Sun Belt. He didn't allow a sack for his entire career. He went to the SEC. He was all SEC, unanimous All-American, Buffalo Bills 2nd-round pick. Like, he's proven that he can develop guys. And then Darnell Stapleton was in the NFL. He was Pittsburgh Steelers. He got a Super Bowl ring from them, if I'm not mistaken. He's been there. He's done that. So I think that they've proven they've got the developers, at least at some positions. But you've got Russ Callaway as your tight end coach. We have no idea what he's going to do. He's more receiver coach, quarterback coach, offensive play caller. Not really a tight end coach. Not sure what's going on there. Jabbar Jaluk at running back has gotten plenty of guys there, and Billy Napier has gotten plenty of guys to the NFL as well. But linebacker, Jay Bateman's been coaching a pretty long time. If I'm not mistaken, he's gotten 5 total linebackers to the NFL, and 2 of them were this past draft. Like, so you've got quite a few spots where it's like, well, we need to find out long-term if you can develop these positions and really compete in the SEC. But recruiting-wise, we know Billy Napier's up there. He's proven that. Like he proved that 2022 class. Don't care what the ranking. I think you said the ranking was like 17 or 19 or something like that. There's 6 starters from the 2022 class are going to be, or 6 players from that class are going to be starting this year. And then 2023 class, you're going to have a few starters, a ton of contributors. 2024, top 3 class across the board right now. So recruiting-wise, you've shown you can do it. But developing and quarterback, because your quarterbacks now, Jack Miller III, you brought in Billy Napier. Graham Mertz, you brought in Billy Napier. Max Brown, you brought him in, Billy Napier. Like, all your quarterback options are guys you brought in. It's not, I inherited Anthony Richardson anymore. Now these are guys that I'm choosing and I'm bringing to the program and I'm starting. So there's still questions for sure. But I think as far as recruiting right now and developing some key positions like offensive line, receiver, DB, you've proven that. It's just about answering the rest of the questions. But I will say, while you do have to answer those questions, I feel a heck of a lot more comfortable if I'm Florida than if I'm Oklahoma with Brent Venables, or even if I'm Texas, because Texas, you're now going to be recruiting in the SEC, and that's a big selling point for you. However, you need to show if you can develop these guys, keep them in the SEC, and win football games in the SEC. Florida has to win football games in the SEC too, but they've been here trying to do, like, they've been here competing that. This is nothing new to them. They're not running the gauntlet week in, week out. You don't get to face on any year other than last year TCU or Baylor or Oklahoma State or Kansas. That's not really okay. Kansas, you can give Vanderbilt, sure, but like that's not really. There's not a ton of gimmies in the SEC. So I think that's going to be the big difference. Where Texas, you shown you can compete. Like the game last year against Alabama, I don't care about Bryce Young's health in that game because Texas just played a hell of a football game. But can you do that week in, week out? And I think that's the bigger concern. Like I know what Napier's going to bring most of the time, but it's a matter of if you're Texas, if you're Oklahoma, can you come in and compete with the big dogs week in, week out, or are you going to get flamed out in the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point you make about Florida bringing in players from Texas, because, Florida already has it really well, in the fact that they're in Florida, and Florida has so much talent in the state. That's why Miami and Florida State have been successful throughout history, because so many great players come out of Florida. But they also come out of California. They also come out of Texas. And to be a truly elite program today, which is why you've had, I don't like using this term, but these super teams, where you've had Georgia very recently, where they're loaded all over the roster. They're sending 15 players to the draft in a year. Alabama's had several teams that have just been elite. They're getting players from all over the place. Bryce Young was from California. C.J. Stroud was from California. So these guys are not from where they're at. So if Florida's going to have, to be able to have a seat at the table with these teams, to be able to be at the top, yes, they do have to recruit outside the state of Florida, have to do it in Texas, and I completely agree. I do think that, like you said, the way Billy Napier is recruiting, it's a good sign. But like you said as well, you're having to go up against these teams week in and week out, and it can wear you down, especially like if you have a season where you've got like 3 or 4 tough games in a row, you get wore down. And then after that, you might have a couple easier games, but then you've got some injuries or you're just beat up, and then you drop a game to a team like Missouri or something that you should have won. And then that's how you can completely spiral. Because again, somebody's got to lose. In this new age SEC, somebody's got to lose. And I mean, you could have Auburn, you could have maybe Florida on a down year, you could have Missouri, South Carolina. Some of these teams just have really bad years despite having a lot of talent. Because I think a lot of times that's why when you see, bowl games, the SEC in bowl games, when there's no opt-outs, like with Florida last year with Oregon State, when you do not have opt-outs, like back when I was younger and you would watch the SEC play, they would have a 6-6 team, and then they play a 6-6 ACC team, and that game's 50-7. I mean, that's the difference right there. You're 6-6, you have the same record, but I've never believed in that you are what your record says you are. It's not true because of who you play. If you're in the ACC, and it's no offense to those teams, but you don't have a hard schedule and you go 6-6, it's great. Glad you made a bowl. But then you got to play an SEC team. If they're all playing like they used to back in bowl games, you're getting beat, by a lot. So I do think that Florida's going to have some struggles. All these teams, the 2 new teams and all the teams that are seemingly getting better. I mean, South Carolina used to not even be heard of a few years ago. After Steve Spurrier, retired or whatever, that they were bad for a while. But they're getting a little better. And then Missouri has been up and down. But Florida's going to have some struggles. But my next question, which is kind of like this past question, do you think that Florida, in the way the SEC is now and the way college football is now with NIL and all the stuff Florida's having to compete in, can Florida ever return to being a national championship level team, on a consistent basis again? Like get back to their glory years of the past. Can they do that in modern football?
I think they will. Eventually. I think it's going to take a while, but I think they will. I mean, again, this is just me saying, like, I trust what Billy Napier is doing process-wise. And in recent months, you've seen Florida's NIL game kick up a bit. I mean, look at what happened in June and July recruiting-wise. They had like 5 commits. Now they're at 21. And it just really heated up, which thank you, Lane Kiffin, because you ran your mouth a little bit and you pissed off Florida. And then they just went out and took all these players from you. So it's fantastic. But I think they will get there eventually. I do think that there's some things that are pretty major that need to be fine-tuned. Like, I have no problem with Billy Napier's offensive system. It's wide zone style, which you see all throughout the NFL and college. It's 12 personnel, which is becoming more and more prominent in the NFL and college. But it's a matter of when you're calling certain plays, certain decisions that are being made as far as, using your timeouts, winning those middle 8 minutes of the game, whatever it is. There's certain things that Billy Napier does really need to work on and improve there. But I think right now he's doing the little things right that are kind of going to help get this team back to prominence. I don't like how many Oregon State fans there are in the comment section right now. That 2 is too many for me. But I do think that Billy Napier is doing things to get this program back up to the top, and I do believe that it will eventually get there. I think he'll be given the time to get there. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of, how long that actually takes. Will it be 2027 that you're in the college football playoff? Will it be 2030? We'll see. But I think that right now, Florida's trending up. Like last year, I understand after beating Utah, the expectations kind of really climbed after you beat Utah there, because that was an insane game, and you won it, and Anthony Richardson looked like he was about to be a Heisman contender. And then it came crashing down. But if you can kind of find this consistency, like last year, the expectation was 5 or 6 wins. You won 6. This year, the expectation, 5 or 6 wins. Who knows how many you'll win? But right now, expectations are not high. But he's setting things up to be a long-term program builder and getting this program back up to the elite level that it deserves to be at.
Yeah, I think I agree 100%. But I think that you talk about with, Anthony Richardson, that still blows my mind that he didn't even throw a touchdown pass in that Utah game, but he was a Heisman candidate. I mean, yeah, all you got to do is do one 80-yard touchdown run, and you're a Heisman candidate these days. I mean, that was a great game. But to me, it almost like that game backfired on Florida. It did, because Utah got better after that. They improved after that. Florida's just stalled. Like that South Florida game was the one that everyone was like, yeah, this team is. It wasn't the Kentucky game. It was the South Florida game. That was bad right there because of the fact there's no way they should have won that game 31-28. Should have been 50-7. That's Florida. I mean, it's Florida, and South Florida is not what they were a few years ago. They're struggling really badly. So that kind of backfired overall. But Florida had a very interesting year last year. But coming into this year, obviously they start with Utah again. Looking at the schedule, they've got tough games up and down, all that kind of stuff. Do you think, like Florida, do you think it's more likely that they make a bowl game versus not? And if you say yes, then what do you think like their record will be like? What are you predicting if you have one for, record prediction for Florida?
I think they're winning 6 games on the dot again. I think that's where they're going to go. They're going to do what they did last year. Like, I don't know if they're going to beat Utah. I will say Utah fans are talking awfully spicy.
Rice Eccles is not the swamp.
for a team that lost last year, they're talking awfully spicy. I did this last week where, Utah fans were like, Rice Eccles Stadium is the best stadium in the Pac-12. Congratulations. Rice Eccles Stadium at maximum capacity is the second worst average capacity in the SEC. Just attendance-wise last year, they are only better than Vanderbilt in the SEC. So I do not care about you being so tough in the Pac-12. I think that Utah should win that game. I don't know if they will. I think whoever does win it, it's going to be close. Obviously, a lot of it depends on Cam Rising. But the expectation for me, 6 wins. Again, that's what my expectation was last year. That's what my expectation is this year.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you bring up about Utah Stadium because, you do get a lot of people saying it's like the best in the country. And I think what helps it, is the altitude. When you're like a team like Florida, you're not used to that kind of stuff because you're playing so low, to sea level and everything. The altitude is a key factor. And I think the other thing is, like you said, how passionate that they are. They are a very passionate fan base. And despite them having a smaller stadium, sometimes that can be to your advantage because it's kind of more condensed and makes it louder than it seems. Kind of like Cameron Indoor in college basketball. Duke's is a lot smaller, their stadium, than, Carolina or Indiana or Kansas or Kentucky, all that kind of stuff. But it's still very loud. I think that's what helps Utah. Because, another stadium a lot of people say is one of the best is Oregon State. And it's very small. Reser Stadium's very small, but they have a very passionate fan base, and they've had some great, crowds, especially when they're playing Oregon. So that's interesting. I don't think that they're going to win either, like you said. But I do think it will be a competitive game as long as Graham Mertz doesn't make mistakes. And I would have to say, 7-5. I think they can do that. I think it's possible they can go 7-5, but 6-6 is a very, possible prediction as well. But it's going to be interesting to see with Florida. I hope they have a really good season in football for the fans because they need it. They really need, to have a really solid year again to, show improvement. You don't want to do too good, though, because then obviously it's going to blow the expectations through the roof. You want that solid build. But, hopefully Florida has a good season. To kind of switch over to basketball for a few minutes here, you talk about Billy Napier. It's his second year. He's got all the question marks about can he build this? How's he going to do this year? Todd Golden's in the same situation. Todd Golden's in his second year. And, obviously coming from San Francisco, a very small school in basketball, kind of like Louisiana with Billy Napier as well. So, they're both from smaller schools making the jump to Florida. Based on expectations for Todd Golden so far at Florida, how have you felt that he's done? Has he done better or worse than you expected so far at Florida?
I think he did worse than I expected in his first year. Not that I was expecting anything great. I just think that one area was from the time that he got hired, he pretty much almost immediately had to start building that roster. Didn't really have much time to evaluate or anything like that. And I think that kind of forced them to try to fill that roster. And they ended up adding players that really just never panned out. And if we're being honest, just didn't belong in the SEC. And so I think that kind of backfired on them. But I think this year they've had more time, obviously, to evaluate. And they've had more time to kind of be like, okay, this is what our current roster is good at. This is what our current roster is bad at. Let's address it this way. And so this year to me is going to be the real kind of, not, if he doesn't have a great year this year, he sucks. But this year to me is going to be, is he for real? I think that's what we're going to see from, because you don't have the excuse really anymore of like, oh, this team's really bad talent-wise. Like Mike White had it bad, and then when Mike White left, they lost players even more, and then you kind of had to just shuffle stuff together real quick. Now it's your team, and now it's Todd Golden's time to go, okay, like can you give us the moments that show that you can turn this program around, especially when you have someone like Riley Kugel, who was one of the, I don't want to say one of the best freshmen, one of the best sausage scoring freshmen from last year. He could just get a bucket whenever he needed to. I do need to see him step up, but I feel like with Todd Golden, he did not live up to my expectations last year. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe my expectations were too high. But I think that my expectations are slightly higher than they were last year, but I'm also way more confident that he'll actually live up to those this year.
Yeah, I think a big thing with Florida, though, was, they were doing okay before this, but they weren't doing great. I still say, like you, that they were a bit, underperforming or whatever, but Colin Castleton getting hurt, though, messed that up. Because I'm not saying they would have made the tournament for sure, but I think it would have been a lot more likely because they had some moments, where they were pretty solid last year because Colin Castleton, was a rim protector. He was, a decent passer. Like, he showcased that in the Summer League. I was watching Summer League. He can pass. Like, he's actually a better passer than I thought. I mean, he can actually take the ball off the dribble a little bit. I mean, he's got a lot of skills that, maybe wasn't showcased a lot, especially when Mike White, was at Florida. I don't think that a lot of that was showcased, but I think that really hurt Florida, in Todd Golden's first season, him going down. But now that Colin Castleton's gone and Florida's got a lot of transfers, they've got, solid players coming in. Do you think that it's more likely than not that Florida will make the tournament this year? Do you think they'll get there this time around?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, I mean, that's my expectation for you. You should be like bottom part of the tournament, like just a bubble team. But I think that the expectation should reasonably be make the tournament. You brought in a fantastic just portal class, whether you're talking about someone like EJ Jarvis from Yale, Micah Handgloten coming in, which finally got his name down, Zion Poulin. Like, you're bringing in a ton of guys who should step in and be immediate big-time contributors, as well as keeping players with you, like Will Richard, like Riley Kugel, like having those players. Denzel Aberdeen should be stepping up, the combo guard, we'll call him. Like, you've got guys who, they've been in your system for a year. They should be all getting together. You've had this time to bring in the players that you wanted to from the portal. They're supposed to be fitting your system. You've had time to evaluate them. Like, last year, that was a big thing, was guys just weren't as good fits for the system as Todd Golden wanted, whether it was they're not as good as ball handlers as we thought they'd be, whether it was they're not as good as hitting knockdown, open catch and shoot threes, which, I mean, Todd Golden says 2 most efficient shots in basketball at the rim, catch and shoot threes. So maybe it's guys that weren't fitting that. That's not an excuse this year. Like, this year, you had time to evaluate players. You had time to go, okay, is this guy going to fit? We'll bring him in. So you don't get that anymore. So I think for me, I'm expecting the Florida Gators to make the March Madness tournament. Like, you should be in there. Because, the top 68 teams make it in there when you consider the play-in for if you're going to tell me the Florida Gators aren't a top 68 basketball team in the country this year, I'm going to be pretty pissed.
I think it's funny, the talk of the expansion and everything, which I don't think they should do because of the fact that there'd be too many bad teams. It's how you have it now, where if you make the tournament, usually your job's okay, unless you're like a top program where they want you to be a top seed instead of you being like an 11 seed barely getting in and you can still get fired. But now, I mean, making the tournament's not going to be enough to save your job. It's like, well, you made the tournament, but you were a 17 seed. I mean, it's like you're not good enough. I don't think they should expand that at all. But yeah, I do think Florida has a really good shot to make the tournament. But a player that was really interesting to me last year was Kowiese Reeves. He was like the epitome of a guy that he's got talent. He was a high recruit, but he's not getting better. He's still struggling to handle the ball, to shoot. He has talent, but I think like him being gone is like the definition of like you're getting out a guy that doesn't fit your system, and now you're bringing in these guys that do, and you should improve with these guys that you were bringing in because you like them. I agree with you there, 100%.
Yeah, I loved Chris. I was like hoping so bad that he would work out, but just
I
never
mean, I really
did.
like watching him. It was just one of the situations like I'm waiting for you to make the jump. You're gonna get better, but it just did not happen. But I guess before we I guess wrap it up and like final thought, I got a couple more questions. One is about Florida baseball. I don't know much about Florida baseball. I don't watch baseball too much, but I never would have thought in my life that Florida baseball would, as of right now anyway, would be doing better than football and basketball. That's crazy that they are. But I mean, is Florida baseball looking good for the future, like next season and beyond?
Yeah. Florida's doing their thing here. Right now it's portal time, so it's like hard to really gauge truly what they're going to be. But I feel like the expectation now with Coach Kevin O'Sullivan, like Sully has been there, I believe, 19 years now in Florida, and he's made the College World Series 12 times at this point. So the expectation for Sully is be great. But also next year, I mean, you've got Jack Caglione for one last year where, it's just incredible to me. Like Jack Caglione led the nation in home runs and was also one of the better starting pitchers on the team. And I mean, throws 97 from the left side of the mound. Just like it was absolutely great. Connor Johnson Sullivan ran into a juggernaut with LSU. Listen, buddy. Florida scored more runs total during that. Okay. So, that's all that matters, not winning the actual game. But no, I mean, with Sully, the expectations to be great. That's it. I know that Ben Chase, our director of NIL with Florida, he has been on the show before, and he's told me, he's like, hey, and I will live by this forever now. With Florida, greatness is not the goal; it is the expectation at this point, and that's kind of the approach that Florida's been taking with a lot of sports now. And baseball is kind of the one where it's like, you haven't let us down yet. Don't start doing that now. So Sully, we fully expect you to get back into the College World Series and hopefully get you back in Omaha.
Yeah, that was crazy watching, that series, because it was like one game I'm looking at the score and it's like 20-3 LSU over Florida. The next game, Florida's beating LSU down. It's like, what's going on? I mean, it was like, I know that baseball is different than basketball, football, but the score differences between games were just incredible. So that was crazy right there. But hopefully Florida baseball will continue to do really well in the future. Now, between basketball and football, we basically established you think the football team will make a bowl game at 6-6. Basketball, they should find a way to make the tournament. I guess basically, which team are you more excited to watch? It's probably football, obviously. And then basically, like, which team do you think is going to do better than their expectations? Like, more likely that they will.
I think basketball is more likely to exceed expectations, but I'm way more excited for football. I always will be, like I live, breathe, and eat and sleep football. So I'm always going to be more looking. I've got right next to me notes where I literally spent half an hour just doing a show for later this week, basically begging Billy Napier to go more 2 running back, 2 tight end, 22 personnel sets. So yeah, it's always going to be football is always going to be what I'm more excited for. But yeah, I think basketball they have a higher ceiling for 2023.
Yeah, that makes sense because, I mean, obviously when you're football, Florida football, you're expecting them to do better than what they always do. Like they should be 9-3, even though they're going 6-6. We like Billy Napier, but you got to do better, Billy Napier. So yeah, I can see why the basketball team would be, the one that probably can do better than the expectations. But I guess before we go, again, to shout out the chat, really appreciate you guys for being here. You got V Ohio State. He stopped by. Jeff as well. You had the Beavers. I mean, it's going to happen. Clint Moses, 30-3, go Beast. Thanks for being here, Clint Moses. You got Humasiro as well. Good evening. I appreciate you stopping by. Then you had Connor Johnson as well. Hey, at least he was saying be nice. He was trying to cool it down. Thanks, Buckeye Mike, for being here as well. And I think, and Will also, hey guys, said Will. So, and he says that he'll be impressed if Florida makes a bowl. So, I mean, if that's, if you're going off Will right there, then that Florida football could do better than expectations. But we're talking about the Florida fans. Their expectations are going to be higher than impressed if they make a bowl game, because they made it last year. It should be better this year. So, but I appreciate all your guys' input. Oh, Connor Johnson, last question. Miller or Mertz? We established earlier, Brandon said that he's Graham Mertz all the way. I asked because I was a little uncertain myself, but I do think it's going to be Graham Mertz.
Yeah. I have nothing against Jack Miller, and I don't hold the bowl game against him either. I know it was one of the worst performances any of us have ever seen from a quarterback. Like Kendall Hinton did better when he had to go from receiver to quarterback for the Broncos a couple of years ago. But also at the same time, I think a lot of people who aren't in tune with the program for Florida, like you don't realize Jack Miller going into that game had no chance to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jack Miller missed the entire season to that point with a thumb injury. He got surgery right before the season on his thumb. You can't grip or throw a football if you can't use your thumb. So he was screwed off the get-go. And then Florida was pretty openly like, we're hoping to get a late bowl game so we can get a full, 14 practices in. They got 4. And so Jack Miller had almost no experience. So he was screwed regardless, even though Oregon State's passing defense was very good. And that was always going to be an issue. There we go. There you go, Connor. Was always going to be an issue. But Jack Miller just had absolutely no chance to go in. And I will let you know, I do gamble, and I did, in fact, tell my listeners to bet this, and I did bet it, that Oregon State was going to cover the spread, which I think was 10.5 points, and there was going to be a total under of 36.5. So you're welcome. I did, in fact, make people money. None of that shocked me. Did disappoint me, but did not shock me.
Yeah, I think it's funny so much, though, just to show you how, the SEC out there above everyone else in most people's minds, because, the results on the field speak for themselves. But listening to Pac-12 fans and even Oregon State fans about how, this was the most important bowl game of, the Pac-12. They had to beat Florida, because if you drop the Florida game, the fact that you got all these guys, that would have just been completely embarrassing. So you got to give Pac-12 and Oregon State their credit. They got it done. They should have got it done based on the circumstance, but it would have been a meltdown if somehow Florida won that game. But yeah, you did good on that, man. I don't bet, obviously, but I do like to, in my mind, I think if I would pick this, -7, whatever, when it happens, wow, I got it right. So you did a great job there. Yeah, under 36, and then them covering the spread. That's exactly what happened. But cheers for Florida. Hopefully in 2023 having a better year in football, basketball, and baseball. It's hard to do much better in baseball, but hopefully basketball and football, they definitely will. But I do really appreciate you for coming on, Brandon. It was a blast, a lot of fun. It was great. Where can people find you? Because people should definitely find you, because you are awesome.
Thank you. You can find me on Twitter with WNS_Brandon. Find at any social media. You can go with Locked On Gators, YouTube Locked On Gators. And I'm there every day. In fact, even tomorrow, 5 p.m., 4-star offensive tackle that just committed to Florida, going to be on Locked On Gators. And that is awesome. We talk about Nate Solder on that show. We're throwing it back there.
So definitely all you guys, if you can and would like to hear about Florida football and basketball, Brandon Olson of Locked On Gators is the place to be for sure. But again, really appreciate you for coming on. It was a lot of fun, and definitely cannot wait for the football season to be here.